Martin, let me think what to ask you. I just think the word impresario
Yeah,
is what you are, isn't
yeah,
it?
it's fine.
Is that what you
Yeah,
are?
yeah, yeah.
Have you, how long before you realise that's what you were?
Well, I couldn't paint. I couldn't paint, and I couldn't draw, and I couldn't play the banjo, and I couldn't play the trombone, and various other things. And I realised that I got a kick out of organising things. Actually, there's a wonderful quote somewhere. I've done a autobiographical thing on my website where I say there's nothing more satisfying than inflicting your own tastes in art and music on the general public. Then I thought, well, there is something more satisfying, but I mean, that's pretty good, I think.
Yes, yes. So, how many years ago did you discover that?
Um, I did my first promotion, I think, in about 1966, so that's 34,
Wow.
47 years ago,
Wow.
at the old Winter Gardens. Do you remember? Are you old enough to remember the Winter Gardens? Man shakes head. The Winter Gardens was a big venue down there on the promenade, and it probably closed about 10 years ago now. But in those days, what did I put on? Oh, there's a wonderful little story here, actually. The first ever, it was a regular, every week on a Thursday or whatever. The first professional guest that I put on there was Shirley Collins, who English banjo player, very big in her day, and she's still going, in fact. And the support act was a certain Jonathan Cadrell. This is 1966, and I Shirley cost £10. That was her fee, but it included her train fare from London. And I went to meet her from Penzance railway station to take her to the Winter Gardens, and there was Jonathan with his white Rolls Royce. So I had to say to Shirley, would you rather travel in a beaten up old Bedford van or a white Rolls Royce? And got the expected reply. But I also did Cyril Torn in Hedy West, an American banjo player, very good. And the fees then, were £10 and £20, £25, and so on.
So, did you make any money?
Oh no, no, no! I mean, the idea is to have a good time, really, isn't it? Away you're the same. But I did run a. I was living in St Ives at the time, and I did at one time run a coach over from St Ives, and it would have about 50 people in it every Thursday to the Winter Gardens Folk Club. But folk was very big in those days, and their Brando and Co had started the Batalic Club,
Yeah.
and there was Telltale Club in Penzance and various other things. Folk was a big deal. Then I think I went to London for a bit, and I came back in 1970, and I got all the major clubs in West Cornwall, folk clubs, to close down, and we put on all the artists from that area on at St Ives Guildhall, and it was Clive Palmer had a group, the Temple Creatures. Gowdy Charles had a jazz group, the Jazz Roots. Bob Devereaux emceed it. Don and Alan, guitar duo, High Speed Gas, and Chrissy Quayle from Senna sang. So this was 1970s, so that was only 43 years ago. And it was great, and this was, we opened up the doors, and there was about 300 people queuing to get inside, and in the end we had about 450, and I thought, well, this is the life for me. I mean, we did it as a cooperative promotion, as far as I remember. So anyway, that gave me a taste for it all, and I carried on for years and years, and we started St Ives Festival in 1978, a group of us.
So then you moved from music to poets and writers and
All sorts of things. Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, I've done the Black Theatre of Prague. I've done big, where they dress up in fluorescent clothes and so on. Black theatre.
I've not seen them.
It's not Negro black. It's
Blacked out, yeah.
blacked out. Yeah, that was wonderful. and you get, yeah, I did a lot of poets. I've done Christopher Logue, Roger McGough, Brian Patton, Charles Causley, Arthur Caddick, Sidney Graham, Bob Dev. Yeah, I think, I mean, music really is the field, and I got involved with the folkies in the 70s and 80s. Then a lot of the African bands. We had fantastic African bands on at the Winter Gardens. And the best of the lot was Remy Ongala and his orchestra Super Matamila. And anybody who knows African music would know it when I say that. And back home, they've got 20 members of the orchestra, and they play non-stop for about 24 hours, and just, the day shift knocks off.
Wow.
And the night shift knocks on. So they're always about a dozen people on stage, but they just play continually. He died, I just saw recently. He's gone now. But we had, acts that he was... I think he was originally from Zaire, but he was based in... He was based in Tanzania, that's it. But there was a lot of music from Zaire, which is the Congo, and from Zimbabwe. Wonderful, wonderful bands. And of course at that time there were a lot of Chilean groups, all these refugees from Chile. They've got to earn a living somehow, so all these little groups playing Chilean music turned up. It's all okay now, but there's a lot of Chilean musicians going back probably to work on the assembly lines or whatever. But it was a great way to meet people from all over the world. Those sort of Australians and Czechoslovakians and Hungarians. They were always good fun. I brought a series of Hungarian groups over. Vashmalom was the best of them, and the group who played the music in the film The English Patient, and the name's gone. But so it's a great way of meeting new cultures and so on, and in fact showing these new cultures to the people of West Cornwall, because all this promoting would be St Ives or Penzance, the Winter Gardens, the Acorn, St Ives Guildhall. We ran a club in St Ives at Mr Peggotty's discotheque, which that would take about a couple of hundred people, and in those days, you'd have a circuit of guests, and they'd come in, they'd play for 15 quid, and then you'd get residents who get £3 a night, and you might buy them a drink or two. But it really was busy in those days.
So you were lucky because you got to know these people in a kind of like working way.
Yes, oh yes.
It wasn't just social.
No.
Which is a good way to get to know people.
Yeah,
but you also knew a lot of the artists as well.
Yeah.
Do you have stories about Roger and Sydney and people like that?
Yeah, I grew up in this sort of, because father was a writer, so a lot of the artists would be regular visitors. He was quite pally with Arthur Caddick and a lot of the St Ives painters. So we took them for granted. Terry Frost used to take me and his sons up to soccer matches at Plymouth, I remember. That was the norm. You must have had the same thing. You take artists and writers as the normal thing, Jess, my stepmother, was a potter, so the whole place was covered in clay a lot of the time. But you took that as the norm. You grow up in these sort of situations.
So would you think that it's really the oral side, the music side, and the spoken word side that is more of your passion than painting?
Oh no, I'd say it was all on an equal footing, really. I'm not a deep intellectual type person. I'm more likely to go for the sort of Charles Causley and the Roger McGough and the Bob Dev and so on, people who can communicate their words easily rather than deep and meaningful. Sidney Graham, though, I did like, but he was a bugger to have to deal with. Did you know, incidentally, this is something that I discovered over the years, that with very few exceptions, poets don't drive cars. Poets always get admirers to drive them round.
Is that so?
And I looked into and it came from a time when I had Roger McGough booked at the Acorn, and there was a train strike, and I said, well, just drive down. Well, actually, I don't drive, you know. And I started looking into it, and I thought, well, Brian Patton doesn't drive. Locally, Bob Devereux didn't drive. Sidney Graham didn't drive. Arthur Caddick didn't drive.
Wow.
And so on and so on and so on. And then you go...
Emily Dickinson didn't drive either.
No, nor did William Shakespeare. And Stevie Smith didn't drive.
Oh, very interesting.
I did. I was driving because I've also in my time, I've driven poets around, and I've driven. In fact, it was Shiva Theatre with Pauline and David. They did a play on Stevie Smith, the poet, and through that I know that she didn't drive either.
Did you ever meet Stevie Smith?
No.
I worked as assistant editor on Ambit, and I could have gone up with Martin to see her, and I just didn't.
It might,
sad. Yeah.
It might be as well, because there's also the problem in show business or in entertainment or the arts that you meet somebody whose art you think is brilliant, and you discover that they're really nasty pieces of work. I mean, there are people I've met who I've had to deal with, and I don't like them at all. There's also wonderful people. I mean, the great majority are wonderful, you know, but there are complete idiots.
Few, yes.
And you think...
I know Sydney was difficult. Didn't you once have some journalist came down?
Oh, yes.
What was that?
This was St Ives Festival, probably about, I don't know, 1980 something. And a journalist came down. He was doing an article for the New Statesman, and he wanted to interview a performer. And this was about 2 weeks before the event. And as all the performers were shipped in, the only one who was local was Sidney Graham. So Robert, who was the coordinator at the time, said, "Martin, you know Sidney Graham. Take this chap out so he can interview Sidney Graham." So we go out to Madron, and Sidney says it would be very nice if we had a bottle of whiskey. So the journalist was sent over to the William IV, came back with whiskey, and we started drinking, and Sidney, he was being interviewed for a bit, and then he turned it round. Suddenly Sidney himself was interviewing the journalist, and he took the journalist back into his youth and his relationship with his mother, and which wasn't very good. And in the end, the poor journalist was weeping tears. He was really distressed, and I had to rescue him and take him away and drive him back to St Ives. And I never saw the article, but it would have been very interesting if it was printed. And then a couple of years later, well, some years later, after Sidney had died, I met his wife Nessie at a New Lynn opening, and I said, "Nessie, why was Sidney so cruel to that poor man? He had him in tears." And she said, "Oh, Martin, he realised that the man had never heard of him, never read any of his poems, and was totally unprepared for the interview, so he felt minded to put him in his place." But, you know, Sidney could be difficult. And, you know, I suppose we all know characters who drink too much, and then they are difficult. But his poems were great, those on the artists in particular. I thought very, very good.
Yes, I always think Sydney's so good about people who aren't there. Either they're dead or Nessie's upstairs asleep.
Yes, maybe, yes. But I had to drive him back from openings on a few occasions. But I don't know, that's what we do, I suppose. We who are not gifted as creative people, we help out those who are.
Yes, it's wonderful. You must have spent a lot of time at Penzance Station waiting for people to arrive.
People to come in, yes. Actually, I wouldn't like that life, would you, as a performer? And you have to travel the length and breadth of the country with your guitar or whatever under your arm, and you get put in some crappy hotel or whatever, and you turn up at a gig after traffic. In fact, I put on Christopher Logue once. Do you remember the chap who did the Private Eye things? Yeah. And I put him on at the Acorn, and he came all that way on a Sunday night, and there was an audience of 12, and it was really, really sad.
Oh, that's terrible.
And in fact, there's another Sidney Graham story here, that in order to get him down, I said that I would take him to see Sidney, and about a week before, I saw Nessie in the street, and she said, "Oh no, Sidney's away that weekend. He's going up to a reading of his own in London." So I was horrified. I thought, well, if Logue hears about this, maybe he won't come. So I kept that quiet, and then Logue turns up after this long train journey, and I say, "Well, I'll drive you up to Madron to see Sidney Graham," and of course Sidney wasn't there, so I pretended, hammered on the door, and oh no, he's not in. Oh. So we took. In fact, Liz Mumford was driving the car because mine wasn't working at the time, but we drove him out to Zana for a drink and then a walk on the cliffs, and of course it peed down with rain, so you couldn't actually do that. And in the end, we came back to Penzance, and I booked him into a B&B for an afternoon's sleep of about 2 hours. We did the reading. There was only 12 people there, and put him on the overnight train back to London. Poor sod,
He's a very good reader, isn't he?
Yes. But I think I described him to someone as waspish, that at this particular thing. I mean, the frustration of coming all that way, and you think, well, I'll see an old friend, I'll do a reading, and there'll be 50 or 60 people there, and they'll all tell me I'm wonderful. Instead, there was 12, and there was a man who asked some silly questions, and he snapped.
Oh dear.
But that's showbiz. I mean, this whole thing of going to places, and if the publicity isn't right, or you're just unlucky, there's something else on, you end up with a tiny audience. In fact, this was 12 people again. Bob Devereux had a group called Mars some years ago, and just before they split up, they got in concert on Radio 2, the 7 o'clock programme. So they were in concert on Radio 2 on a Sunday night. On the same night, they had a gig in Padstow, so I drove them over there. We stopped the car at 7 o'clock and went into this field and listened to them being big stars. They're being broadcast to the nation. We thought we've cracked it. And get to Padstow, again there was an audience of 12 people. And it is frustrating. I mean, what you really want is somebody to say, look, I've got an intelligent audience of 500 people, and can you provide entertainment for them for 2.5, 3 hours? And of course you could get some wonderful things if the money is guaranteed. It's such a horrific gamble, and I mean, to an extent, putting on exhibitions, which I also did, is equally a thing. It's not quite so horrific as the music promotion.
I realise that when we do our evenings at Treve,
yes,
I guarantee the performers 60 people.
Yes.
That I'm absolutely guaranteeing.
But you ring us all up.
I ring every single one up and threaten them with death if they don't come.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it is a thing, but if you're... I mean, I've just done 2 at the Acorn. I won't say who they were, but I lost, let's say, several £100.
Yeah.
And I really advertised like mad. And,
yeah.
You put posters in libraries and record shops and bookshops, and you get it on Radio Cornwall, and you do this and you do that, and the people don't come in, and both of them were absolutely brilliant acts.
Yeah.
So really what you want to do is to put on acts that'll fill the place. I mean, there was one, again, I won't mention the name, but St Ives Festival I was involved with for many years, and we put one on act, and he was £8,500, right, for one night. at St Ives Guildhall. Tickets were 25 quid. It was the quickest selling ticket we've ever had at St Ives Festival. We sold all 500 tickets in about 2.5 weeks. And, you know, the guy was quite good. He wasn't
brilliant.
Brilliant, you know. And so this is a frustrating thing. You put on something that's brilliant.
Yes.
And you don't get the people.
No.
You put something on that's, you know, that's been on
people have heard of
on television, you know.
I know.
And they say yes, yes, yes.
Yes, it's sad.
And I mean, there's another thing. I mean, with I put on over 600 gigs over the years.
Wow.
Of all sorts, you know, from folk, rock, jazz, poetry, talks. George Melly doing his talks, that was good. My Life and Times by George Melly, and he'd talk on everything from his life and times to Picasso, Matisse, and Surrealists and Impressionists. He had a list of 13 subjects, which you could, you know, and it's all in his head, or was in his head, and he was always good fun. And his band was pretty good. In fact, that's another thing. George Melly, he was a brilliant performer in the same way that, say, Mick Jagger is a brilliant live performer. And there are plenty others. Tito down here in the days, brilliant live performer. But they're not necessarily good recording artists.
Right.
You know, some people will shine on stage and some people would shine in the recording studio. And Tito could never do that in the recording studio.
Really?
You need the two-way feedback sort of thing.
Gosh.
But and there are others, you know, that are brilliant in the recording studio, and live they're dreadful. So then I did over 200 exhibitions. So I went into a new world really, and I worked as a printer in the early days. I worked as a printer for many years. And
that wasn't with letterpress.
No. This
was litho, wasn't it?
It was always litho.
Yeah.
I mean, I did a couple of things on letterpress on the Penwith machine, for posters. But I was at Hornsey Art School, so we would have done letterpress there. But litho, you know, and it wasn't arty stuff. It was just
information,
letterheads and business cards and election leaflets. We loved those. 35,000 run. Anyway, so I did that started that in 78. And then I was in a little old sort of backside studio, and then this chapel came up to let in Cross Street in Penzance, and it was great. So I moved in there, and then somebody said that, you know, this would make a good gallery as well. And this would be about 92. And I thought, yes, yeah. And the chap himself was a photographer, so I said, well, let's do an exhibition of photographs. And we did. And we only sold one, but quite a few people came in. And I realised you could run the two things in tandem. You could be a printer's and a gallery. And in fact, people found it amusing to go into a gallery and see this bloke covered in ink yelling and shouting at his machine. So there was quite a good side on that side. And then, so I did quite a few shows there, and then later I moved into Market Hughes Street, still doing the printing and the exhibitions, and I've always had a very wide taste in art, you know, so I love naive paintings, I like abstract paintings, I like impressionist paintings, and so on and so and so on, you know, that's so I had quite a wide range of exhibitions, and I'd always keep some spare paintings away from the I'd have a different exhibition every month, and I'd always keep some spare paintings in another part of the gallery, so if people didn't like the main act, so to speak, they could go for the other ones.
Stock.
Yeah. And I did manage to keep going for, from 92 to 2011, I think it was. I eventually gave up, and just with the slump, people were not buying paintings. And I think with hindsight, and we didn't realise it at the time. In the 90s and the early noughties, it was a boom time. You know, that people didn't think twice about buying paintings, and there was always this extra money they were making out of selling their houses and so on. You know, so I mean, I sold one painting for £5,800 to the barrister who'd come down to do a job for Penrith Council. So I thought, well, that's like getting a rate rebate back. And you know, there were some mad collectors. There's one I know who's got at least 100 paintings by a local painter, you know, and but then they like it. They've got surplus money, so you know, you and I might well spend it on chocolate or something. No, I'd spend it on music. I think that's the thing. Whenever I saw a painting, I'd always buy a CD. That's my treat in it.
Yeah, yeah. What did you come across Kathy a lot at the Penrith?
Yeah.
What do you think was? She's pretty remarkable. Her staying power.
Oh yes, yeah. No, I mean Kathy. She was always good for a conversation. She always said to me, Martin, if somebody prints my memoirs, I would have to leave St Ives, she said. So she must have been involved in some naughty things in the 60s. The only thing is she could have, Penrith Gallery have now got a website, which is a fantastic thing for them to have, and an email, presumably. But Kathy would not move with the times. And that was her problem, really. And the plants, well, that's another story.
Well, how did she weather all the upheavals there? It's extraordinary.
Yeah. Oh yes.
Her career there is
Yeah.
She was like an empress.
Yeah. And she was a little bit deaf. I once put an old friend of mine there doing a concert on a reproduction grand piano, you know, which was great. And it was coming towards the interval, and Kathy went and put the kettle on while Karen was still playing. So, blub, 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 blub. And Kathy didn't realise it was causing interference at all. You know? But that was all many years ago. But I always had a good chat with Kathy, you know, and she will be missed. She'll be a difficult act to follow. I don't know what you put in there, really.
Have to change.
Yeah, it will have to change. But certainly the marketing of it. But always the problem with older people handing something on. I mean, like, same thing with St Ives Festival, you know, that in order for St Ives Festival to carry on, really they need people in their 30s and 40s, in their prime of life, to do it. But people in their 30s and 40s won't put on things that people in their 50s and 60s like, right. You know.
Oh,
so you need, and the same thing would apply in art as well, you know, that's, you know, before they know what's happening, they'll be showing videos in the Penrith Gallery. And
it is a problem, isn't it?
You know, the older people are not going to like it at all.
I know that I often think that there's so many painters, you know, it's quite difficult to be a painter.
Yeah.
And there's quite a lot of sculptors, there's a lot of writers, etc., etc. But really, you're the only impresario. Oh,
no, there's Mark over at Morva. God, I've forgotten his second name now. But he would be a good guy to interview, and he promotes all over the country.
Really?
And what they do shares. They do. So 5 or 6 promoters will get together and they'll book a big. This is in the rock end of things, and they'll put things on, and then they take a percentage or put in a percentage. There aren't lots of promoters. Most of them probably bankrupt or fled the country or whatever. But I've always I'll tell you. Sorry, just a minute. this is the thing that has kept the promotions going. It's
the gallery
my
guide,
little
yes.
production, because
Yes.
I probably make about 3,000 quid on that, and that actually covers my losses on promotions and gallery. So I had some horrific losses on the gallery and on promotions, but that sort of covered it.
Covered you over, yeah.
With the gallery, you never knew what was going to happen. You'd sit there, and maybe somebody would come and spend 1,000 quid. Maybe nobody would come in, nobody would buy.
It's like
anything.
fishing.
It is. You're fishing. Yeah.
Sitting there by the river.
Yeah, you've got the baited hook. Go on, buy something, buy something. And I even had one September when I didn't sell anything. And September's the best month of the year.
Oh, God.
I forgot who I had on then, but it wasn't your brother.
Probably me.
Yeah, it's probably you. Actually, there's actually, you don't have to, you can cut this bit out, okay, but there's a wonderful little story that I put you on once, and, your little pictures, and I think you had 51 little pictures, and the next act in was, in fact, Matthew, your brother, and he put in 52 pictures. I'm sure it was a coincidence.
How funny. Except his were twice the size.
His were twice the size, yes, and double the money probably. But in the end you find Matthew is obviously one of them, a very good seller and good painter. In the end, there's maybe there's a dozen painters in West Cornwall who will really sell, and all the galleries are desperately fighting to get those people because and some people knock them and they say it's just commercial artists and so on. But it's those people who are subsidising the people who are taking the risks and so on.
Yes, good point. Good point.
And you must, thank God for the... in Penwith Gallery, they used to put on artists who were quite commercially minded, and I'm sure that subsidised some of the other things they did.
Do you have any memories of Roger?
I never met Roger Hilton. I mean, Sidney Graham I knew from...
He's this way, anyway, Roger was over there.
Well, Sidney Graham I met at Mevagissey because I got Halligan Mill connections. And Sidney was Jock Graham, the poet over at Mevagissey when I was a kid in the 40s and 50s.
Right.
But I never met Roger.
So did you meet Lionel Miskin?
Oh yeah, Lionel. Lionel recommended me for... and David Tremlett. Me and Dave Tremlett were pals. Tremlett was from Mevagissey. He recommended us for Falmouth Art School. So
you went there?
Yeah. So Lionel I knew again from the 50s in Mevagissey.
Right.
Yeah, I went to his opening, him and the Hewlett opening about a couple of months ago. But yeah, wonderfully eccentric character, Lionel. And when he was teaching it at Falmouth once, he had to go somewhere more urgently, so he set up the class, put his reel-to-reel tape recorder on the table, pressed the button, and then disappeared for 40 minutes. So he had his lecture all on tape and slipped out. Yeah, wonderful chap, Lionel. Yeah. He
was an example of somebody who wrote as well as he drew.
Yes.
He's such a good mixture.
Like Sven Berlin, who actually wrote better than he drew.
Yes, I agree.
Yes, yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's being able to do those two things. Oh, there's a quick little Lionel Miskin story. Mevagissey in the 50s, and Lionel had been painting a sunfish. One of the local fishermen had caught this exotic sunfish, so Lionel had painted it over a period of a few days, a week, or whatever. He finished the painting, the fish was beginning to go off, so Lionel realised he had to get rid of it. So he thought, I know what, I'll chuck it in the sea. So he got the baby's pram, wrapped the fish up in newspapers, took it down to Mevagissey Harbour, walking towards the end of the harbour to dump the fish when he tripped. And the pram with the little bundle fell into the harbour. And people were saying, save the baby, save the baby. And Lionel was saying, no, save the pram. And someone's written that down somewhere, but there are these people, well, you've seen them, there are these people around here of whom tales are told, aren't there?
And Lionel is one of them.
And he's one of them, yeah.
Well, Martin, thank you very much. That's wonderful.
Right.